am coming to you from my new study. As you can see, plenty of shelving here, plenty of boxes still to unpack here. And I got 2 brand new shelves that just got delivered, so I will be able to start unpacking more boxes. And hopefully this will look like a better place to do any filming. We're going to talk about productivity for the next 30 minutes. And by productivity, I'm referring to the definition that I posted earlier by Charles Duhigg. And if you haven't read any of his books, I strongly encourage them to. He's definitely a thought leader on the world of productivity and making the most of your time. He is very much of the same school as Stephen Covey when it comes to figuring out your priorities and working your work rather than working the crises around you and the busy work, because that doesn't advance our big goals, right? So hopefully over the next half hour, we're going to talk a little bit about, I'll give you tips and tricks and hacks if that's what your questions go to. I don't mind doing that. But I'm hoping we can go a little deeper into it and deal with what gets us to the heart of our matter, right? Your choices for your business, for your writing career is very unique to you and why you're doing it. And if you don't know your why, it doesn't matter how busy you are, you're not going to be productive. Does that make sense? We have people in our group from all around the world, and the majority are from Texas because I personally invited people that I know, but I would love for you to let us know where you're from or where you're tuning in from. Might be better. We have some folks that travel with their jobs and might be tuning in from wherever they are. So I always like to see where folks are hanging out right now. So her question is, how do you keep up with ever-shifting priorities? And I absolutely see how that's a concern for her, but I think that's a concern for everybody, because just the nature of being alive, our life situation changes, doesn't it? I mean, you're young, and then you're on your own, and then you're maybe in a relationship, and then maybe there's children, and there's job changes, and there's changes in your parent status, and there's empty nest syndrome, and there's so many different changes that come through life. So our priorities do change just as course of life, right? But then some of us that are multi-passionate, such as Nancy and myself and many of you watching, we have so many different things that we're interested in that it's hard to stay focused or figure out where the most of our intention should go. One of the things I have taken to doing in the last couple of years is setting kind of an overall purpose and mission statement for my year and some big things I would like to accomplish for the year, but then looking at quarterly goals and how I'm going to make that happen. Because as your priorities shift and change and things happen beyond your control and new interests become available, you need to be able to pivot with that. And I think so many years, I and people I worked with were making their annual goals or their 5-year goals, turning those into their bosses, and then had to do it no matter what. Well, if you consider, you know, my original career was marketing, back before the internet was even a thing in homes. It makes sense that my life mission is still the same, but the way I implement it has changed. So my answer to Nancy would be, give yourself enough direction and instruction to where you know you have a plan, but be vague enough that you have room to pivot within it. And don't be afraid of pivoting. We're not, goals and objectives are not set in stone. And priorities change, right? So even today, my priority changed from what I crawled out of bed thinking I was going to do versus what actually happened because of an emergency in my son's life. So, you know, we have to allow ourselves to have that flexibility and that willingness to change and go with the flow. But your mission should always be the same, right? So if your mission is to write a book, if your mission is to share your story to help other people, if your mission is to teach something that inspires and encourages and helps others, that mission stays the same regardless of what your day-to-day goals look like. And the goals are then to drive us towards getting some of that done. Does anyone use defined time slots for multitasking? And if so, how has that worked for you? Okay, so let's address the multitasking thing right away. I remember back in the 80s and 90s, that was one of the things I taught when I taught time management, and I really try to stay away from the term time management now because I think it's a misnomer. There's no way to manage time. It's marching on regardless of what you do. We all get 24 hours a day. It doesn't matter if you're an ant or a giant, you have 24 hours a day. It doesn't matter if you have no job or if you have the craziest job on earth like Elon Musk, right? You still have the same 24 hours. So you can't manage the time, you manage yourself, and you prioritize what's most important for you to do in that time that you have. So no multitasking. The scientific answer to that is our brains cannot focus on two things at a time. They simply flip, right? And so the question is, how fast can you flip from one task to another? It's switching. And as writers, we think in words and linguistics. So think of code switching. If you can change from one language to another depending upon your with, or one dialect or vernacular depending on whom you're with. If I'm with my writerly friends, I'm going to speak with writerly terms and writerly abbreviations per se. If I'm, talking to my doctor, I'm going to use that type of thing. If I'm talking to family members, maybe it gets a little more redneck. If I'm speaking with someone who speaks Spanish, I'm going to do my best to speak Spanish with them. So it's about code switching, and our brains do that with our tasks. We switch from tasks to tasks. So as we get older, here's the thing: we have more information and we have more experience and we have more resources, but the task switching can slow down. Doesn't always, but be aware it can. So you will find if you have two tasks to do, rather than try to do them simultaneously and jump from task to task, try focusing on one at a time and then the other time. And studies have shown that by focusing singularly on a task, you will accomplish more in the same amount of time because your focus is undivided. If you're interrupted, it takes a matter of minutes to get back on track. The same thing happens when you switch from one task to another. It takes time. Think about, all of us get in the zone when we're writing and we're off on our imaginary world, and then somebody interrupts us, and then when we come back to our work, it takes a while to get back up to speed again, right? We lose the flow. Same things happens with multitasking. So I strongly encourage you not to multitask. As far as defined time slots, I strongly encourage you to get rid of the task to-do list or the task list, action items kind of thing. We need to know what you need to do, yes, but when it comes to figuring out your day, so often we fill the page with all these tasks we want to get done, and then we beat ourselves up when they don't get done. And the fact is, there was never enough free time in our schedule to do them in the first place. So what I encourage you to do is work out of your calendar. I use Google Calendar for this. I put in the big things, the events where I'm interacting with other people, or I have appointments or meetings, whatever is locked in. If you have a day job or you work for somebody else, your work hours obviously get plugged in. If you have to work around kids' school schedules or your school schedules, we have a couple students and a couple professors in this group. You put in those big blocks first, and then see how much free time you have. And I don't like the word free. There's nothing free, but discretionary time would be a better term, like discretionary income, right? And then put those to-dos in your calendar rather than a to-do list. If you do keep a to-do list, use it just as a jog your memory and to prioritize, and then take the things that are most important to you and put them on your calendar in a specific time slot. The other thing that I would encourage you to do as you're figuring out your calendar is to batch your tasks. By that I mean, so your to-do list has 12 phone calls to get done during the day for whatever reason. It's easier to sit down and make all those phone calls at one time than to do it throughout the day, because you're constantly starting and stopping, and where did I put that phone number and what do I need? So if you can sit down and do all of that at a time. Same with creating your content calendar for social media or your blog posts. Let's use blog posts for an example. So rather than write a blog post, revise a blog post, format a blog post, come up with the images for the blog post, do all the social media promotion of the blog post, publish the blog post. Okay, that's the workflow, right? You're much wiser using your time to spend an hour brainstorming all the ideas you want for blog posts for the next month, and just come up with a list of potential things. Then have a session where you sit down and you pick out maybe the 4 that you want to focus on for this month or this week, whatever your blog schedule is. Then come back and, or when you pick them out, see if you need any research, what do you need? And then do all that at one time. And then come back and draft them all at one time. Then in another setting, come back and revise them all at one time. Then format them all at one time. This is the batching. So what happens is you get in that flow and you make better use of your time. Additionally, there's different times of the day that each of us are better able to deal with these tasks. So for me, I'm a night owl, and I know that if I need to do anything analytical, it has to happen at night. So all my editing, all my revising, all of my business work, if I'm doing my bookkeeping, that all happens at night. My afternoons, not my best time. Right now is at lunch, and then I'll go into a funk. I know this about myself. So in the afternoon, I do my laundry and my dishes and the things that don't require a lot of brain power. I listen to some podcasts, anything that I can do as far as chores that don't require any analysis or creativity, that's my afternoon. In the morning, that's when I'm creative. And I think it's because I'm not real alert in the morning, and my internal sensor isn't awake yet. So I get most of my creative writing and my drafting done in the morning. So this I know about myself. You might be different, your chronobiology might be different. So that would be something to consider as you're figuring out your ideal schedule. And again, that revolves around what those big blocks are that are non-negotiable, such as jobs or school schedule or whatever. So hopefully that's some tips that will help Nancy and will help everybody else also. Okay, I'm just scrolling through the messages here. Kat, thank you. You're making all the tweetables for me. So if anybody wants to tweet something, feel free. You know I love the social media. Kathy Reuter, how do you get back on track without adding further stress when life throws you curveballs? If y'all know me and my story, you know that's the story of my life. Living with chronic disabilities and illnesses, I'm constantly feeling like I'm getting back on track. So the best way I have found to handle this, and I have not perfected it yet, it's a work in progress, right? But if I have, say for a presentation I'm creating, I keep everything organized in Asana. I use a project management tool, Asana. Some people like Trello. You might just have an open document or an Excel spreadsheet, you know, whatever you think best with. But I have a workflow where I know all the tasks that need to be done. Well, if I'm asked to give a presentation, I open up a new task. I put in the topic that I've been asked to speak on, the date, the time, the information, and who my contact person is, and that goes in the main description. And then I have a set workflow of what I'm going to do. For my presentation, I'm going to do research on that topic. Then I'm going to outline it. Then I'm going to come up with a title and a promo splash page that I can put out and use on social media. Then I'm going to flesh out my outline, and then I'm going to turn it into a PowerPoint, and then there's going to be a revision process, then the actual confirmation of accommodations and details and confirm all the event, and then I know that I will need to revise it once again and make sure all my hyperlinks work, and then I'm going to practice it, and then I'm going to give it, and then after I give it, I'm going to send out all the email requests for the handouts, and I'm going to add those emails to my email list. So that's about 10 steps in that workflow. The workflow doesn't change, the presentation will change. So when life throws me a curveball and I lose pace, I can go back and I know my workflow is set. It doesn't take me as long to get back into the flow of things. Additionally, there's been times that major things have come up and I haven't been able to get back to it. That's when I can ask somebody, can you step in and do this? Here's all the instructions. I've thought through the process, and so my workflow is set. The same thing I do with my content calendar. I know that in the first week of the month, I am going to download all the holidays coming up, all the National Day ofs coming up, and I'm going to put those in my calendar. And then I'm going to think of generally what I want to speak on about the month, or what the theme of the month is that I'm going to be posting on social media. And then I go find the images and get some loose captions and start putting it together so that I have a basic outline for the month. So even if I shut down, I can still go back to that Asana page and just copy and paste things into social media or into my social media planner, and it's set to go, and I don't have as much to recreate or to regroup from. So that's the big thing, Kathy, that I would suggest. And I know you've got a family emergency and some crazy things that you're dealing with, as well as your regular commitments. But if you can plan your workflows first and then start putting in the pieces as you go, and then don't hesitate to delegate. I think so many of us, especially if we're writers or we're entrepreneurs, we're so used to doing everything ourselves and we don't think of how to delegate. Here's the other thing. You need to delegate the things that cost you the most energy and suck your soul dry and don't require your personal attention, right? If you're a photographer, Kat, I see you out here. If you're a photographer, obviously you need to be the one behind the camera and you need to be the one interacting with the person you're going to photograph. But there's no reason that you should have to do your bookkeeping, right? That doesn't require your personal touch if you can delegate to that to somebody trustworthy. There's no reason that you unless editing is your jam, would have to edit all those pictures or do the follow-up with your client. So those are different things that you can delegate. As a writer, I unfortunately have to do my own drafting. I wish I could delegate that, but I can delegate some other things. So my editing, that would be something I would delegate, right? So think about what you can get off your plate if that will help you to reach your goals and stay on track when life throws you those curveballs. So many people connect productivity with busyness. And I posted this quote earlier this week. It's Henry David Thoreau's, and what he wrote was, "It's not enough to be busy, so are the ants." The question is, what are we busy about? And this comes back to the idea of prioritizing and knowing your mission. There's a lot of things that I'm really good at and that I enjoy doing, but they don't move me closer to my priority, to my end goal, to my mission. So I need to, schedule those things for when it's more appropriate and requires less time and energy. Make sure that you are using your peak periods of performance. And again, if you're a night owl or a morning lark or, do insomnia, you know when your prime time is. But there's a big push in the productivity community not to have your phones in your bedroom with you, to leave them, in another room so you can't look at them first thing in the morning. Because what happens is you look at your phone and suddenly your day is filled taking care of everybody else's priorities and doing everybody else's crisis management, and you don't get your own stuff done. So if your priority is to write a book, first thing you need to do, your first available prime moment needs to be working on that book. And you can fill in your other priorities elsewhere. At this moment in my life, Writing is important, but it's not my number one priority. So that's been relegated a little bit to the back burner while I'm doing some other things like launching this Facebook group and teaching. Teach was my one word for 2019. I don't know if y'all are familiar or do the one word thing, but I thought long and hard and prayed long and hard. And I really feel like in addition to being called to be a writer, I'm called to be a teacher. So teach has been my focus, and it's been my top priority to do speaking engagements, to find ways to reach out and teach people. So everything I do this year, I've tried to keep that in the forefront of my mind, and I've tried to focus on that as my number one thing before I get involved with everybody else's crises and crisis management. So strongly encourage you to focus on those things that only you can do, that require your personal touch and that move you closer to your mission. As we're coming towards January and everybody talks about New Year's resolutions and goal setting and that, I am not one for resolutions. I think it's the teenager still in me that wants to rebel. I see resolution and I see how fast I can break it. You know, there's something about the word, and I know it's semantics to a large degree, but I don't do well with resolutions. I do well with goals, and goals are things that, and I believe in the SMART system. You've all heard SMART. They have to be specific. They have to be measurable. They have to have an accountability. R is, and T is time. I forgot what R is off the top of my head. And times, and time that you can evaluate it. So I believe in SMART goals, but even more than that, I believe in putting systems in place. So when we were talking earlier about having a mission and having quarterly goals, then what's your system to help you with that goal? So for me, I just launched on a weight loss plan and fitness, my Operation Get Fit, I'm calling it. I'm not on a diet. I refuse to use that because that's another thing I seem to have a semantic problem with in my head. But my Operation Get Fit. So I know what my goal is. I know what my end weight should be. I know how many squats and push-ups I should be able to do. I know how fast I should be able to walk a mile. I have all that figured out. So there's time, there's measurable. I have an accountability partner. I have all those things that make it a SMART goal. But now here's when the day-to-day happens. You need a system in place. So what's your system? My system is I'm using a food diary. I'm drinking enough water. I'm exercising 30 minutes a day no matter what. So figure out what your system is. If it's for writing a book, what do you need to do to make that happen? You need to see how long it's supposed to take you. If you're doing the 10-minute novelist program and you're only writing 10 minutes a day, well, how are you most effectively going to use those 10 minutes? What can you do in the meantime? And even when you're not writing, you can be thinking through plot points. You can be imagining your characters. You can be developing the setting in your head. You can be observant of the world around you, showing you how you may or may not want your world to be built for your story. Those are things you can do away from the 10 minutes of focused writing. That's a part of your system, right? And then when you get to your wherever you write, say you're going to your desk, you have a system. What gets you quickly into the mindset to do that? There's so many studies showing that music makes a difference, that smells make a difference, that your location and your body position make a difference in getting you into that zone faster. Athletes talk about their warm-up. When I was coaching competitive swimming, my kids had a warm-up for the morning practice. They had a different warm-up if they were doing evening practice, and they had a different warm-up for competition. And they knew when that competition warm-up hit, it got them in the zone really, really fast. Same thing for when I sit down to draft. If I need to be creative in what I'm writing, I know that I need to sit down at my desk, I need to have a certain music playing, and I need to be chewing cinnamon gum. I don't know why, but if I do those three things, I get in the zone really fast. So there's something in our body memory, our reward center, that connects to that. And if you've read Atomic Habits by James Clear, he talks about this too in one of the middle chapters of the book, how setting yourself up to succeed based on rewards will help you build habits. And the stronger you build those habits, the faster you will get the task done. And that's basically what we're talking about with setting up systems. If anyone had questions I didn't answer, feel free to ask them. If you heard something in the last 30 minutes that triggered another idea and you have a follow-up question, feel free to put it in the comments. If I can answer it quickly, I will. If it's something that looks like it's going to need more time and attention, maybe we turn that into a focused Q&A. I wish you a wonderful Wednesday, and I hope that you are encouraged. I hope you learned something new, and I hope you are ready to finish out your week strong and productively, working on your priorities. Thanks so much.